My name is Reilly. I'm 31, and until last week my family still thought I was the broke loser who'd never own anything nicer than a one-bedroom rental. Friday night, my phone lit up with a FaceTime call from my older sister Kendall. She flipped the camera to show off her brand new marble kitchen island in the 5-bedroom house she's been bragging about for months. "When will you ever be able to buy a house like mine?" She laughed, zooming in on the Sub-Zero fridge. Mom jumped in without missing a beat. "It'll be a long time. He's useless anyway." Dad chuckled in the background. "Yeah, good luck with that, son." I didn't say a word. Just listened, ended the call, and went to bed. The next morning at 7:03 a.m., I sent one single photo to the family group chat, an aerial drone shot of the entire reserve at Travis Ridge, 82 luxury homes glowing gold in the sunrise, with a red circle around Kendall's roof, and the caption, "Your HOA payment is now 60 days past due. Late fees start today." Their phones exploded. Mine stayed silent. If you want to know why my sister went dead quiet and why my parents suddenly stopped laughing, hit that subscribe button right now, because the next 6 parts are absolutely brutal. I still remember the day my older sister Kendall Reilly Bradshaw signed the papers for her 5-bedroom house in reserve at Travis Ridge, like it happened last month instead of 4 years ago. She was 31 then, glowing in the photos she posted from the closing table arms around Mom and Dad, while Derek stood behind her, holding the oversized key the builder handed out for social media. The place sat on half an acre, had a pool with a waterfall, and overlooked the hill country west of Austin. Mom kept saying it was the smartest investment the family had ever made, and Dad bragged to everyone at the hardware store they still owned in Round Rock that his little girl finally had the home she deserved. They'd put 15% down for her, a little over $120,000 pulled from the rental properties they'd been collecting on since the 90s. Kendall never hid how proud she was of that. Every time the subject came up at family dinners, she'd remind us how hard she and Derek worked, how they sacrificed, how the market was only going one direction. And every time, without fail, the conversation drifted to me. Mom would sigh and say I'd never get my life together if I kept jumping from job to job. Dad would add that renting forever was throwing money away, then look straight at me like I was the cautionary tale sitting right there with a plate of brisket in front of him. I was 19 the last time I spent a full night under their roof. The fight started over something small, me coming home after midnight from a late shift, but it ended with Dad telling me I needed to figure out how to stand on my own 2 feet because they weren't running a hotel. I packed one duffel bag left before sunrise and crashed on a buddy's couch in South Austin for the next 8 months. That couch became the first of many. I poured coffee at a shop on South Congress in the mornings, pulled doubles on weekends, and spent every free hour teaching myself to code through free courses online. By 21, I was picking up freelance gigs building simple websites for local businesses. Nothing fancy, but the checks started coming in steady. I lived cheap on purpose. Shared apartments with 3 other guys, drove a 10-year-old Civic with no AC, cooked rice and chicken in bulk on Sundays. Every dollar that didn't go to rent or gas went into a high-yield savings account I opened the day I turned 20. 5 years in, I had almost $90,000 saved and a credit score that made lenders return my calls. That was the down payment on my first duplex in East Austin back when prices there still felt reasonable. I house-hacked it, lived in one side, rented the other, and used the income to buy the next property 18 months later. Nobody back home knew any of this. When I showed up for Thanksgiving or Christmas, I still drove the same beat-up car and let them assume I was scraping by. It was easier that way. Kendall's housewarming party was the first time I stepped foot inside reserve at Travis Ridge. She gave the full tour, pointing out the quartz counters, the wine fridge, the view from the master balcony like she'd designed the whole neighborhood herself. Mom pulled me aside in the laundry room and asked quietly enough that only I could hear when I planned to stop wasting my life and do something real with it. I smiled, told her I was working on a few things, and changed the subject. She shook her head the same way she had since I was 16. By then, I'd already closed on the raw acreage west of the lake, 62 acres of scrub and cedar that nobody wanted yet because the infrastructure wasn't there. I found 2 private lenders willing to take a chance on a 24-year-old with a growing track record and a detailed plan. We broke ground on Phase 1 2 years later, 30 custom lots with underground utilities and fiber already run. I kept my name off every public filing. The holding company was registered in Delaware, managed day-to-day by my attorney Naomi Chen, the only person outside the lenders who knew Connor Reilly was the majority owner. Looking back, I can see the exact moment the gap between what my family believed and what was actually happening became impossible to ignore. It was the Christmas after Kendall moved in. We were all crowded around Mom and Dad's dining table in Round Rock, passing mashed potatoes when Kendall raised her glass and announced she and Derek were thinking about putting in an outdoor kitchen before summer. Dad laughed and said if I ever managed to buy a condo, I should let them know, so they could throw me a party too. Everyone chuckled, even Garrett, my brother, who usually stayed quiet during these things. I just nodded, took another bite of turkey, and made a mental note of how much cash I had sitting in the construction loan account that week. That was the night I decided I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. I already had. 11 years ago, when land prices on the western edge of Austin still hadn't exploded, I found a 62-acre parcel listed as old ranch property that nobody seemed to want. It sat miles from the lakefront, mostly cedar and limestone, with one dirt road running through it, but the county zoning already allowed residential development, and the taxes were dirt cheap. I drove out there alone one Saturday morning, stood in the middle of the brush, and knew it was the one. 2 private lenders I'd met through my duplex deals agreed to fund 70%. A small real estate fund out of Dallas that liked young operators with skin in the game covered another 15. I put in everything I had left after the East Austin properties, about $240,000 in cash and sweat equity, and walked away owning 68% of the entity that would eventually become Reserve at Travis Ridge. We didn't break ground for almost 2 years. Permitting in Travis County is slow, utilities cost a fortune, and I refused to take on bank debt that would force me to sell lots too fast. Instead, we built in phases. Phase 1 was 30 lots, all half-acre or larger, with custom builders I handpicked because they didn't cut corners. By the time those homes started closing, Austin had woken up to the west side, and values were climbing faster than anyone predicted. Phase 2 added another 32 lots and a guarded entrance. Phase 3 finished the community with 20 luxury estates tucked against the ridge each, with panoramic views most people only see on postcards. I never put my name on a single marketing brochure. The holding company stayed buried behind a Delaware LLC, and day-to-day operations went through my attorney and minority partner Naomi Chen, the only person besides the lenders who ever knew Connor Reilly was the majority owner. Naomi handled every contract, every HOA filing, every escrow instruction. To the outside world, she was the face of the developer. To me, she was the reason nothing ever leaked. Sales moved faster than projected. The first lot sold for low 6 figures. By the final phase, the cheapest remaining parcel closed at $1.8 million before the buyer even poured the foundation. Cash flow from lot sales paid off the original loans years early, and the HOA dues we set intentionally modest, at first built a healthy reserve fund without scaring off buyers. I reinvested every dollar into infrastructure, wider roads, buried power lines, a community park nobody asked for, but everyone uses. By last year, the entire neighborhood appraised north of $400 million, and my equity stake sat comfortably above $270. Kendall bought her house during Phase 2, a resale from a cardiologist who'd relocated to Houston. She closed in early 2021, right as the market peaked, and paid $780,000, easily the most anyone in our family had ever spent on a roof. Mom and Dad co-signed the loan to help her qualify, something they never offered me, and threw a party when the appraisal came in $90,000 over asking. They had no idea the land under Kendall's new pool had once been part of the same scrub I'd walked alone that Saturday morning 11 years earlier. I attended the closing as a guest, stood in the back of the title office, and signed nothing. Naomi handled the seller side through a separate entity, so there was zero paper trail connecting me to the transaction. When Kendall asked the builder's rep who the developer was, he shrugged and said some investment group out of state. She never asked again. That was the beauty of the structure. No one in reserve at Travis Ridge, not the neighbors, not the HOA board I quietly controlled through proxies, not even the city council members who approved our plats, ever needed to know my real name. I paid taxes on time, kept the common areas pristine, and watched property values do exactly what I'd planned from day one. By the time the final phase sold out last spring, the neighborhood had become the kind of place magazines write about and realtors use as their benchmark. Gated, quiet, and expensive enough that most people assumed the owner was some hedge fund guy from California who never showed his face. They weren't far off, except I grew up 40 minutes away in Round Rock and still remember what it felt like to sleep on a couch, because my own parents thought I'd never amount to anything. Friday that week, the family iMessage group chat lit up again, like it did every couple of months when someone needed money for something they refused to budget for. Kendall started it with a string of photos: glossy white cabinet kitchen, huge island, new pendant lights she'd just had installed. She captioned the album Phase 2 complete. Finally feels like home, followed by about 20 heart eye emojis. Derek chimed in with a video panning across the backsplash, bragging that the contractor finished 3 days early. Then came the real reason for the post. Kendall added a picture of water stains blooming across the ceiling in the upstairs hallway, and wrote, "Of course, the roof decides to leak right after we drop 25 grand on the kitchen. Anyone have a roofer they trust?" Mom replied within seconds. "That's what the emergency fund is for, honey." Kendall shot back a crying, laughing emoji and typed, "Emergency fund is currently recovering from the kitchen." That was Dad's cue. He posted a screenshot of an estimate he'd already gotten, $38,000 to replace the whole roof, and added the line that made my jaw tighten. "Family effort time." Garrett's got 2 kids in daycare, so he's out. Connor's still single, still renting, still no real bills. He can cover at least half. That's what family does. Garrett sent a thumbs up and wrote, "Happy to chip in what I can, but yeah, Dad's right. Connor's got the lightest load." Kendall jumped back in. "Exactly. You're always saying you're working on things. Connor, here's your chance to actually help for once." I stared at the screen while notification banners kept sliding down one after another. Mom sent the praying hands emoji. Derek posted a gif of a guy throwing cash into the air. Kendall followed up with the direct jab. "Come on, little brother, don't leave me hanging. This is literally above my head every night." I never typed a single word. I just watched the thread climb past 60 messages in 20 minutes, everyone assuming my silence meant I was scrambling to figure out how to say no without looking selfish. They had no idea I'd already paid cash for the roof on my own house downtown 6 months earlier, or that the company that built Reserve at Travis Ridge had replaced every single roof in the neighborhood under warranty last year, Kendall's included at no cost to any owner. By 9 that night, the conversation had shifted to how much each person could realistically contribute. Mom promised to pull from the hardware store line of credit. Dad said he'd skip the new truck he'd been eyeing. Garrett offered $2,000 and an apology that daycare was killing him. Kendall kept circling back to me, tagging my name every few messages, like if she said it enough times, I'd magically materialize with a check. I muted the chat, set my phone face down, and opened my laptop instead. Naomi had already forwarded the quarterly HOA financials that afternoon. The reserve fund sat at just over $3 million, healthy enough that dues hadn't moved in 4 years. I made a note to have her schedule the annual audit a little earlier this year. Nothing dramatic. Just routine maintenance on a community that was about to have some very interesting conversations about money. Saturday morning, Kendall posted a poll. Should we go with architectural shingles or metal roof, and tagged the whole family again. 72 people voted before lunch because she'd made the poll public. The comments underneath were full of neighbors I didn't know offering advice, contractors sliding into her DMs with quotes, and mom proudly telling everyone her daughter lived in the nicest part of West Austin. Monday came and went. No money moved. Tuesday morning, she sent the first question mark. By Wednesday afternoon, the tone changed. Kendall posted in the group, "Seriously, Connor radio, silence. We're on a timeline here before the rain comes back." Mom added, "This isn't like you to ignore family when we need you." I closed the app, poured another coffee, and waited. They had no clue the invoice they were about to receive from the HOA had absolutely nothing to do with the kitchen remodel, and everything to do with choices made years ago when they decided I wasn't worth investing in. Monday morning, Naomi forwarded me the preliminary HOA audit for the entire community, a routine report she ran every quarter before the accountants finalized everything. One line jumped out immediately. The Bradshaw residence at 1827 Travis Ridge Court showed 3 consecutive months of non-payment totaling just over $12,000 plus late fees. The address belonged to Kendall and Derek. I asked Naomi to follow standard protocol and send the formal demand letter by certified mail the same day. Nothing personal, nothing accelerated, just the same notice every other owner would receive at this stage. 2 days later, she confirmed the letter had been signed for, and the 30-day cure period officially began. That afternoon, my phone rang with Kendall's name on the screen for the first time since the roof fundraiser fell apart. I let it go to voicemail. She called again 10 minutes later, then switched to FaceTime. On the third attempt, I picked up. "What the hell is this?" she started without saying hello, holding the demand letter up to the camera. $12,000 in 60 days or they put a lien on my house. "Are you seeing this?" I stayed quiet long enough for her to keep talking. She flipped through the pages, reading sections out loud like she couldn't believe the words were real. When she finally stopped, I told her calmly that the HOA followed Texas law and that the board had no discretion on past due assessments. She cut me off. "I need to know who actually owns this place, Connor. The letter says Lakeview Dominion Holdings LLC, but nobody can tell me who's behind it. I'm calling the management company tomorrow." I told her she was welcome to do that, then ended the call. The next morning, Naomi received an email from Kendall requesting written confirmation of the current majority owner for lien purposes. Naomi drafted the response exactly as we had done for 2 other owners in the past year, a 1-page letter on company letterhead stating that Connor Reilly, through various entities, held the controlling interest in Lakeview Dominion Holdings LLC and, therefore, in reserve at Travis Ridge. My signature appeared at the bottom as managing member. Naomi attached the redacted operating agreement showing my 68% stake and sent it over. Kendall called me an hour later, screaming so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Derek grabbed the phone from her at one point and demanded to know if this was some kind of joke. When I said it wasn't, he went silent, then handed the phone back to Kendall. "You own the entire neighborhood," she kept repeating like if she said it enough times, the truth would change. "Our house is inside your development, and you're threatening to lien us." I reminded her, the notice wasn't a threat. It was the legal step required before any further action, and that she and Derek had received the same courtesy reminders every other owner got at 30 and 60 days. She started crying about the kitchen remodel, about how they'd stretched to make the numbers work, about how Mom and Dad had co-signed and would lose everything if the house went into default. I listened until she ran out of words, then told her the fastest way to stop the process was to bring the account current before the 30-day window closed. After that, the late fees compounded and the lien became public record. She hung up on me. That evening, Mom tried calling. Dad sent a long text about family sticking together no matter what. Garrett left a voicemail asking if we could all just sit down and talk like adults. I didn't answer any of them. 2 days later, Naomi received another email from Kendall, this time attaching screenshots of the confirmation letter and asking whether the board would consider a payment plan. Naomi replied that the board required full payment within the original cure period and that no exceptions had ever been granted. She copied me on the thread. By the end of that week, the certified mail return receipt showed they'd received the final notice before lien filing. The balance had climbed to $14,800 with accrued fees. I closed the file on my computer, leaned back in my chair, and waited for the part where they finally realized the money they'd spent years telling me I'd never have was the same money now, deciding whether they kept their house. That weekend, the entire family showed up unannounced at the reserve at Travis Ridge HOA office, a low limestone building tucked behind the main gate that most residents had never needed to visit. Kendall and Derek arrived, first followed minutes later by Mom and Dad in their 10-year-old Suburban with Garrett pulling up last in his minivan. They marched through the front doors like they owned the place and demanded to speak to whoever was truly in charge. Naomi greeted them in the small conference room, calm and professional in a navy suit, and asked how she could help. Kendall slapped the stack of letters on the table, the demand notice on top, and said they weren't leaving until the owner explained why their family was being targeted. Mom stood behind her, nodding, arms crossed, while Dad told Naomi this was personal and they deserved answers. Naomi explained that the HOA followed Texas property code to the letter and that every owner received identical treatment. Derek interrupted to say they'd been current for years until the kitchen project threw them off, and surely the board could make one exception for people who'd never caused problems. Garrett stayed quiet in the corner, scrolling his phone, probably calculating how much more this was going to cost him. After 20 minutes of circular arguing, Naomi excused herself to take a call. She texted me from the hallway they're not leaving. I grabbed the folder I'd prepared that morning and walked the short path from my on-site construction office to the HOA building. When I stepped into the conference room, the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Kendall saw me first. Her mouth opened, then closed. Mom turned around slowly, eyes narrowing like she wasn't sure she was seeing correctly. Dad muttered my name under his breath. I took the empty chair at the head of the table, set the folder down, and slid copies of the previous night's board meeting minutes across to each of them. The document was only 4 pages, but the key paragraph was highlighted at the duly called special meeting of the members of Reserve at Travis Ridge Homeowners Association, representing 100% of the voting interest in attendance. The board approved an immediate 42% increase in monthly assessments effective the 1st of next month to replenish the depleted maintenance reserve and fund the complete reconstruction of Ridgeview Drive, damaged beyond repair by recent heavy rains. The motion carried unanimously. Dad read it twice, then looked up. "You control the votes." I confirmed that the entity I owned held 68% of the total voting power, which under Texas law gave me sole authority to call meetings and pass any measure without needing another owner's approval. The 5-year grace period on certain developer subsidies had expired 18 months earlier, so those discounts were gone for everyone, not just them. Kendall started shaking her head. "You can't do this. You cannot raise dues 42% overnight." I reminded her the bylaws allowed emergency assessments with 30 days' notice, and the engineer's report attached to the minutes showed the main road would collapse within a year without immediate work. The reserve fund had dipped into the red, covering unexpected storm drain repairs the previous spring. Derek asked about hardship waivers. Naomi answered that the board had never granted one and had no plans to start. Mom finally spoke, voice trembling, asking why I was punishing them for things that happened years ago. I told her this wasn't punishment. It was maintenance on a neighborhood I had spent a decade building and still had to protect. Garrett finally looked up from his phone and asked how much the new dues would be. Naomi slid over the updated budget. Starting next month, Kendall and Derek's payment would jump from $940 to $1,382, plus the $14,800 they already owed. Silence stretched for a long moment. Dad cleared his throat and said we were still family and there had to be some middle ground. I told him the middle ground was paying the past due balance before the lien hit the county records in 9 days, then staying current on the new amount like every other owner. Kendall stood up so fast her chair rolled back and hit the wall. She called me vindictive, said I was destroying their lives to prove something nobody cared about anymore. Derek tried to calm her down, but she was already crying. Mom reached for my arm across the table and I pulled away. I gathered the extra copies, stood, and told them the decision was final. Naomi would email the official notice to every owner by end of business Monday. There was nothing left to discuss. They left the room one by one without another word. I stayed behind with Naomi to sign the final assessment resolution, then walked back to my office alone. The sun was setting over the ridge, turning the rooftops gold, and for the first time in years I felt absolutely nothing when I thought about the people who'd just walked out. 10 months later, the first real blast of summer heat rolled into Austin again, the kind that makes the asphalt shimmer and turns every car into an oven by noon. Derek lost his senior developer job in the April layoffs that hit the tech corridor hard. Kendall had planned to go back to work after maternity leave, but daycare costs for 2 kids ate more than her old salary ever brought home, so she stayed home instead. The mortgage payment they'd barely managed before now became impossible, and the new HOA assessment sat on top like a boulder. They missed the first increased payment, then the second. By the time the bank sent the notice of intent to foreclose, they were 7 months behind on everything. The house at 1827 Travis Ridge Court went to auction on a Tuesday morning in late June. A flipper out of Dallas bought it for $680,000, $100,000 under what they'd paid 4 years earlier. The moving trucks came 3 days later. Mom and Dad put their Round Rock house on the market the same week, hoping to pull enough equity to cover the shortfall and keep Kendall from drowning. They listed at $425, took an offer at $390 after 2 weeks, and still walked away with less than $50,000 after commissions and the second lien they'd taken to help with Kendall's down payment years ago. It wasn't nearly enough. The bank kept the rest. Garrett stopped answering my texts the day the foreclosure notice hit public record. His wife sent me one message asking me to leave them alone because the kids were old enough to Google their aunt's name and see the headlines. After that, his number went straight to voicemail and never came back. Kendall and Derek rented a 2-bedroom apartment off Palmer Lane in Cedar Park, the kind of place with beige carpet and a pool that never quite looked clean. Derek took contract gigs that paid half his old rate. Kendall started working 25 hours a week at the Ulta in Lakeline Mall, standing on her feet through swollen ankles and midnight feedings, folding sweaters and ringing up teenagers who had no idea the woman helping them pick foundation used to live in a gated community with a 3-car garage. I heard most of this secondhand from a mutual friend who still worked at the title company. Naomi forwarded the final lien release once the foreclosure cleared. The HOA recovered every penny plus legal fees when the property sold. The new owner paid 6 months of dues in advance just to make sure the file stayed closed. One Friday evening in early September, I stood on the balcony of my new penthouse at the Independent downtown, 48 floors above Congress Avenue, watching the bats swirl out from under the bridge as the city lights came on across Lady Bird Lake. My phone had been quiet for months. No more missed calls from Mom asking if we could all just talk. No more angry voice memos from Dad about blood being thicker than money. No more texts from Kendall telling me I'd ruined her life. The view stretched all the way west until the hills disappeared into the haze, and somewhere out there the rooftops of Reserve at Travis Ridge glittered under the same sunset that used to shine through Kendall's kitchen window, while she laughed about when I'd ever be able to afford a house like hers. I thought about the years they spent measuring my worth by what they could see, the years I spent proving them wrong in absolute silence, and the single moment everything flipped, and they finally saw the truth. Some people only respect you after they realize you were never the one who needed them. That's the part I want anyone listening to this story to take away. Never let someone else's small opinion of you become the ceiling you live under. Build your own house brick by brick if you have to, and when the day comes that they look up and finally notice how high you've climbed, you won't need to say a word. The view will do it for you. If you stayed with me through all 7 parts, thank you truly. This one was personal. Drop a comment and let me know what hit you the hardest, or if you've ever had a moment where the people who doubted you the loudest suddenly went quiet. I read every single one. And if this story made you feel something, share it with someone who needs to hear that silence can be the loudest revenge of all.